Hello, welcome. I was going to wait at least like a minute or so more, and then we'll get started. But hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Lance.
Hey, Peter. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So
today,
let a few more people in.
right?
Okay, we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. I'd just like to take, my name's Lance Shad, and I'm with Digital Transitions, who will be co-hosting this webinar today with Peter Steinhauer. And first, I just want to go over a little background of, who Digital Transitions is, what we do, and things like that. On this webinar is Peter Steinhauer, who will be the featured presenter, myself, Lance Shad. Arnab Chatterjee will be helping with the answering questions on the side in the chat area, and Kate Stone, who pulled it all together. We thank you. Let me go to the next slide. There we go. Digital Transitions is a nationwide company, actually international company, that we focus on medium format digital solutions based on the Phase One platform and related accessories that go along with it from manufacturers such as Cambo, Arca Swiss, ISO, to name a few. We also manufacture our own hardware for use in the cultural heritage and corporate archiving realm. We have 4 business units. One is commercial photo for general photography and fine art. The next is cultural heritage. Then we have our scientific division and our recently acquired Pixel Acuity division, which is a service bureau that uses all of our equipment. We have offices based in New York, LA, and now Virginia, with our reps spread out across the country. And our main focus is our customers and helping them with their imaging needs. Peter is going to be presenting today on the systems that he's using. He's been using Phase One systems for the past 15 years or so, has worked through a variety of the models, and he'll talk about his transition between the systems. And currently he's using the IQ4 with the XT body. And then also he'll touch on his scanning capabilities that he uses our DT Atom with the same digital back he uses out in the field to scan and film archives in-house, and is now providing that as a service along with fine art printing through a new organization company he has started called Aperture Archival. So without further ado, I'm going to let Peter take this over and get started. Oh, one more thing. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to post them in the question window on the right-hand side, and one of myself or Arnab will either answer it right there in the chat or post it to be answered via live with Peter at some point during the presentation. So feel free to ask questions and enjoy. Here you go, Peter.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. Everyone out there, wherever you're joining from, and thanks for joining the webinar, and thanks to Digital Transitions for hosting these great events on Project Lemonade. They've been really fantastic, I think, for all of us here during, the everyone being at home, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, stay at home. But it's been great. I'm happy to join and share my work on all of this. And so over the next hour and a half, like Lance said, I'm going to talk about my progression from film cameras, where I started my career, to the crossover to digital capture, and then into Phase One digital backs, and now going through the family of the digital backs up to the current one, the IQ4-150, and also the XT camera system, which we'll explain about a little later on. And I'm going to go over some images from the from the beginning of my career, going through and actually starting in some film, briefly going through that, and some of the up to until current stuff, and with the stories behind them. I use a tech camera. for 95%, if not more, of my work. And I've been doing this for more than maybe 10, 12 years. I've been on this camera system. And so I'm going to be talking about the Phase One XT, which came out. And I've got one right here that we can just, I'll be able to show a little bit about it and really how it's impacted my work. And as Lance said too, we're here in my studio right here where I digitize film, my archives of film, as well as opening a business where I've done it for others, and am opening that for other artists, and everything's behind me here, so we'll go over that. And yeah, I hope I just hope this can inspire other photographers or people who do work in the cultural heritage community, that we all can communicate. I think really right now, I think it's a really exciting time in photography with what is happening, specifically for me with this equipment that is really, that has come out in a very large way. So yeah, that's where we'll start from now on. And so I guess should we go through the slides now and just talk about work? So yeah, this is where I started, really. I started my career after photography school and art school, and I moved to Vietnam. I lived in Asia for 20 years, starting in 1993. And these are the two film systems that I started up on. Early in my career, I was with film cameras. So you'll see the top left one there. That's a Mamiya RZ67. It's a great camera. It has bellows in the camera, which others, like if you think about a Hasselblad, and I hope everyone out there too can follow and understand what I'm talking about. There will be a little bit of tech talk in this, and perhaps, I know there are some people out there that didn't start on film, so I'm just gonna go and explain about these, but then digital is where we're gonna be starting. But that camera, the RZ, had bellows in it. You can see there it had a motor drive on the bottom of it, which was really fantastic. It was a heavy camera, but it was great. Rotating back from vertical to horizontal on it, which was the only one really at that time that could do that. And also a lot of my work was down below on large format cameras. This is a 4x5, and it's a Wista, the Japanese camera systems, cherry wood, little brass parts. I had a 4x5 and an 8x10 that I used a lot, and primarily that became my main source of photography, printing in a darkroom, shooting large format. And this is an image of me where I was in Ha Long Bay, which is in the northeast of Vietnam, and I was on a roof on a countryside house. So I've been to this place, and it's part of my first book project that I was working on. So that camera's got, you can see on the front of it, I've got neutral density filters on it. I think I have a Nikon 400 tele lens, or Schneider 400 tele lens on it. And yeah, if anyone out there remembers that film, I was shooting T-Max 100 film. So I moved to Vietnam, excuse me. I moved to Vietnam to start my first book project, which is called Vietnam Portraits and Landscapes. And so it was all portraits of Vietnamese, very normal life Vietnamese. This is early on in 1993. So Vietnam hadn't opened up. It was 2.5 years before the US had an embassy there. There was no diplomatic relations. So they were very, very far behind time, cut off. They hadn't really opened up to a lot of tourism and so on. So I have a large family background with Vietnam as well. But my project consisted of photographing normal Vietnamese artists, painters, herbalists, and countryside workers, villagers, inside their living and working environments. And, for example, the guy on the left here, he was an herbalist at that time, and he sat like this. I saw him one day walking by, the shop fronts were open, and he was just sitting like that, and every 5 seconds or so, he would sit up and take a drag off his cigarette. I remember he had like 4 teeth, and there was just little tiny warm halogen light where his book light just lighting him. So I went back the following day with my new friend and assistant who was helping me out working, and I went into all these environments and I lit everything I brought a case of lights. They were Broncolor impact lights. So I set up lights on all of these. So I made this image of him. The woman on the right, this was outside. She took care of a pagoda, and she was the caretaker, and this was her room. She slept on this. It's actually some sort of a mantle or a place for large offerings and so on, which turned into her room. I lit these, the same thing here. And landscapes were all over the country. These were all 3 of these so far, they were shot with 2 1/4 film, 6x7 off the Mamiya. There's a huge mountain pass in the very, very far northwest of Vietnam on the Chinese border. In fact, that far mountain in the back is the Chinese border. It was a huge storm before we came up here. The storm had blew over, and it was like, looking over the edge into this valley, looking into heaven. It was phenomenal. I've been back to this place like 6 or 7 times. It's never looked the same ever since. And this is in the very, very far south, Mekong Delta, just a river market. This is an intersection of 5 different canals off the Mekong Delta. So I climbed up on the only concrete house in the area. I believe that if I remember right, this is 4x5. But yeah, it was just bustling market. So that's what I was doing when I started my career off. And then in 2002, I came back to DC just for a little bit. I had met my wife and we moved. She was living here in DC. She's Vietnamese American. She pulled me back to Vietnam, or pulled me out of Vietnam in Asia and brought me to DC. And that's where I had met people in Mamiya. I'd done some work with them and some ads on them, and they talked me into getting into the first digital backs. So these are the Vallejo and the Aptus, and you can see on the very first one here on the left, this is it's 22 megapixel, and that you'd have to shoot it to an HP iPac. The image would come on that, and it was frustrating. It was hard, but I mean that's how you did it. And I know that Phase had some backs. I don't remember which ones they were, but I had a relationship with Mamiya, and they talked me into going to this. So, the benefits of all of this stuff was, I could shoot digital instantly. I thought it was really interesting. The negative side of it was I was still shooting film and printing in the darkrooms. I had galleries that represented me by then, and I couldn't make prints. These were digital, and I was printing in the darkroom with silver paper. So I was experimenting with Epson printers, but the files off of these just didn't hold it, and just the inks weren't there yet at this time in 2002. Matte papers, things were bronze, the colors were bronzing, and it just wasn't working. So anyway, I've always had my one foot in the digital darkroom since school days. So I knew this was going to be the future. So I stayed on with it, and then I upgraded to around 2007 up to the next one, the Leaf Aptus, which had a big screen on it, and that made life a lot easier, more interesting. But yeah, quality really still wasn't what I wanted, and very short exposures of 30 seconds. And so I wasn't happy really with the software. Was confusing for me. So I was really questioning at that time about digital. I'd invested 5 years into it, and this back, for example, I was doing when I was in Asia. I was also photographing. I was covering Vietnam for Time magazine, but they were sending me all over. So I would do it was like high-end photo essays, covers, and where I'd go in light environments, and I was photographing, you know, actors, artists, you know, luminaries, you know, some presidents and so on. This camera, unfortunately, went down on the middle of a cover shoot for me and stopped my heart. I didn't get the cover. We had to postpone. I redid the image, but they had to make the cover for, you know, a different story. So I lost the cover. So yeah, c'est la vie. That was I think pretty much the last straw with me. And that's when I met, I knew the people at Phase One in Hong Kong, and they introduced me to, you know, the family here of the Phase One backs, P45 Plus, which was out at that time. And these are the progression of the backs that went up later throughout the years. But they really convinced me into trading in. They gave me a great trade-in of my Leaf equipment and to join the Phase One family. That was a proposal to me. So they gave me a back to try. And it was, you know, it was really quite impacting for me. It was like 39 megapixels, which was essentially twice what I'd had before. So the resolution was great. Color was great coming out of it, but there was also you could do an exposure of an hour, whereas the other ones were only 30 seconds. And you'll see later on, I put a lot of movement in my work, and I've had movement in my work since the very, very beginning when I started photography. So that was a key thing for me. And that is the reason that I went over. This first back used the Kodak chips inside the sensors, and they had a thick coating on them, so it they didn't succumb to heat. And so yeah, very clean exposures. So that was the P45 was a game changer for me. So and also I'm living in Southeast Asia, hot and humid. You know, most of the time I'm just right on the equator. It's always 95 degrees, 95% humidity or hotter. So these backs, you know, they need to take heat, and it affected the Leaf backs a lot. I couldn't do clean, long exposure. So, but the P45 Plus, like I could run when I did very long exposures. I could run a 30-minute exposure at a time, which I didn't do many of them. I didn't have a need for that long, but they were constantly clean. No hot pixels in the files, and so it gave me peace of mind. So when I would be on a job traveling somewhere, which I did a lot for my personal work, I would come home and I'd be confident that I had these images, even though I would see them on my laptop at home or in the hotels, but I wouldn't take time to go through everything. But I knew I had the images, and confidence was a big thing for me. And I've been with Phase One ever since then.
And the P45 Plus, just to let everyone know who might not be familiar with the Phase One product line, is still a very usable back today. We have a lot of clients still shooting with that back. It's a super solid system, and a very good value today, and available in a variety of camera systems.
Yeah. And this is my first project with that back. So in fact, the first week that I went there, Phase One in Hong Kong, they gave me the back to try to convince me. So I brought it with me to my first trip in Bali. I was working on a very specific project there of kind of structure, but also landscapes throughout the island, and black and white. Excuse me, gosh. So super hot and humid, right on the equator. And these are examples of what I couldn't achieve, you know, with the other backs. Being on the equator too, the light comes up and goes down same time every day. So 7 in the morning and 7 p.m. It gets light and gets dark. So I'm shooting at that same time, and sometimes at 7 p.m. it's still 95 degrees out, and it's 90% humidity, if not hotter. And so, here, then that's when I photograph very soft light, dramatic light. Bali is extremely dramatic with they have micro climates all over the ocean, all over the island. So it can be very cold up in the mountainous areas. You get lots of fog down below on the sea. On the sea, it's hot and clear. Lots of clouds everywhere all the time, though. So it was a perfect place to, and exposures are always long there. So it was a perfect place to work. And so these are just two examples of what it's like there. And I'll just explain really quickly. On the image on the right, Bali's a very spiritual island. Everything is focused on this volcano that's right behind. It's Mount Agung, and it had erupted a few times and decimated much of the eastern half of the island. But there's two volcanoes on the island, and everything revolves around that. And they have these offerings everywhere. Offerings at a stream that comes into a rice field. They'll have an offering right at the beginning, and that's this on the right-hand side, this kind of sculpture that's sitting in the water. They'll have it in rice fields. They'll have it on rivers. They'll have it on oceans, and they're all over the place. So I did a big series on offerings, and so this one was someone who put it up, offerings to the sea. People actually go out and put flowers, incense, and they drape it with this cloth that's very particular to Balinese culture. So that's just some stories behind what these images are about. Then we move on to, I came back after a week, and I had been working on this project here. It's in Hong Kong. That's where I was living at the time, and it is. It's all on urban architecture and structure, man-made structure. It was also black and white. Hong Kong's one of the most dense cities in the world, and I was able to work fast with this back. The quality and was amazing. And I was starting to print large at this time for my gallery. So by meaning large, a 40 by 50 inch print, and I could do that with the P45 Plus. It was making amazing prints. And so it was also it was a smaller size camera than large format cameras, obviously, and it allowed me to maneuver into smaller spaces. And so this particular image was this, it's kind of off an alley. It's very, very local building. We couldn't see it from the main street. And I had seen this from the first time I went to Hong Kong in 1994. I found this alleyway, and it comes in, and you come down this corner and you turn right into this alley, and this is what you run into this. And so I had made an image from the ground floor in like 1994. And then when I went back a couple years later, I had my 4x5 with me. I was still on the ground level, and I had a 4x5 trying to correct the perspective, and just wasn't working. I always knew I needed to be up on the 15th floor to get this out of one of these windows. So when we moved there in 2007, I woke up one morning and I was working on this Hong Kong project, and I went in, took my assistant, my friend, a good friend who's in Hong Kong, who actually, he was the Phase dealer at that time there, Joey Pong. He went with me. He's from Hong Kong, and we tried to get into this building. They thought I was, the building management thought I was a developer, because these were old. They had been rumored to be torn down and put up, some other large office buildings or so on. So they thought I was a developer posing as a photographer. So I had to show them my business license, my Hong Kong ID, my books, and a day later they approved me, and I went in. And we went up to like the 15th, 16th, 17th floor, knocked on some doors, and one woman allowed me to come in. She said, "Come back tomorrow." So we came back the next day, and we went into her apartment, and these are tiny places, they're like 300 square feet. And we went in, and we had to move her sofa and put the camera through the bars on the window. And there's no possible way I could have done it with a 4x5. The front standards wouldn't have fit through the bars. And so that was a very satisfying image experience making that. That was, working on this, and I put the smaller, the Phase One, or actually it was the Mamiya 645 body got through the bars, and here we go. We got with this quality, and this was, this has been one of my best selling prints for quite some time. And here we are with, this is just another part of Hong Kong. So this is the more calm, I call it spiritual, dramatic side of Hong Kong, quiet. There's a tremendous amount of nature in Hong Kong outside of the city of what everyone thinks about this concrete jungle. So again, this was, this was the P45 Plus, and I think it was a 150 lens. It's called Black Moor. So this is a big mooring, a big moor outside of, on the outside of the islands at some spot. Long exposure. I think it was like a 2-minute exposure, a minute exposure. Hong Kong has clouds like this, microclimates. Clouds are all over the place in Hong Kong. That's why so much. And then during this time, this is where I transitioned into, so while, again, my first trip, take a step back going into 1994, I had seen these buildings when I got out of the airport being wrapped. And I thought Christo, the environmental artist, Jean-Claude and Christo, they were there wrapping buildings. He's an environmental artist who wraps buildings around the world. I thought he was in Hong Kong wrapping buildings. And I saw this gigantic yellow thing, framed in bamboo, and there was yellow material going up it. And that was the first time I'd gotten to Hong Kong. So I got in the taxi, went into my, drove to the hotel where I was going. I'd seen about 4 other of these places, which I quickly realized that they were construction sites. And this is a process that they do in Hong Kong. They wrap the building in bamboo scaffolding, and they can go up to 80 stories in bamboo, in scaffolding. And then they wrap it in different color materials, which is like a nylon mesh. And then you have these giant wrapped packages that are in this monochromatic setting. And I was just completely entranced by them right away, seeing these. So I make, as what I do where I go everywhere, I make reference images. So I every time I came into Hong Kong, I was just constantly thinking about this project, taking reference images. And when we moved there in 2007, I started photographing them as a project. And it started off in black and white, but then they were in color. I didn't, on the P45 Plus, they don't have a black and white option. So when you shoot on the back, the little screen on the back, it always came up in color. Then you would have to go back to the Capture One software, download your images, and change it to black and white. So all day long when I'm working, I'm seeing these in color. I'm photographing them in color, and I'm actually starting to like them in color. And I had never worked in color. And I'd come back to my studio, work on them in Capture One, and switch them over to black and white. So they just weren't working well for me. So I worked about a year, photographing them for about a year. And finally, with my gallerist there, saw them. I made some prints in color, and he talked me into showing some prints. And they sold some prints. This was the first print that I had actually sold, and I started showing him in color, and I actually liked it in color the best. So I just continued on with this project. This is another example here. This is when I actually moved up when the P65 Plus came out. So that was is that a 60 or is it a 65 megapixel lens? I think it was a 60.
Yeah.
Yeah, full frame.
Also sensor.
So resolution came up. It was just a higher resolution. Yeah, we went from a Kodak sensor to a DALSA sensor,
which has drawbacks. Not, you have the full frame and more resolution, but you couldn't do the long exposures.
Right. Yeah. I think there was like 1 to 2 minute or something like that.
Yeah.
So with this project, I wasn't doing too much of that anyway, but so I'm always getting up on buildings to get these images. This is actually a diptych that I made. I was up on top of buildings. So in Hong Kong, and by this time, I'm full into this project, a year and a half working all the time on it. And, I'm living there, so I would just go out my door. These sites, these buildings are everywhere. They're all over Hong Kong. So they were changing all the time, coming up, going down. They usually stay wrapped for about a year and a half. And while they're going up, another one's coming down and another one's being built somewhere else. And they chisel off or they'll jackhammer off the facade of the tiles of the building or replace the windows or something. And then these things come down. They take all the material down, then the bamboo down, and you have this brand new building. So that's how we came up with the name Cocoons. Actually, my wife came up with that. I'm going to give her credit here on that. She came up with the name Cocoon. But so all the roofs in Hong Kong by law have to be unlocked. So to get into them is, there's sometimes when, I'm the white guy in Hong Kong and I'm going into these different areas where, there are no white people, white guys living in the buildings. So I come in and they're local buildings. A lot of them are local buildings, or to get into a building to photograph like I am here, to photograph across at another one, they all have security guards down below. So I come in with a tripod over my back and, I'm carrying a bag and looks like a suitcase. All my camera bags have wheels on it. And they kind of look at me and I have to get into the elevator without, usually they're supposed to stop me, but I get on, I always pretend I'm on my phone talking with someone and I know exactly what I do. I just get onto the elevator, push like floor 22. The roof is on floor 25. I'll get out and then I'll jump into the stairway and I'll go up to the roof and make the image. So that's how I would get onto these buildings, but to make these images. But this one, this happened to be, if I remember right, I think this was the 28 Mamiya lens, and with the 645. The 645 body. And so during this time too, I'm full into architecture, and this is when this is like 2009, 2010, I transferred in to start using tech cameras. And there's an architectural camera where the back slides up and down. For the people who don't know, architectural photographers use them a lot. You level the camera up, and rather than aiming your camera up at something where the lines of the building will converge, this you set up, and then the back will rise up and down, and you can capture higher and lower parts of the image. Everything is very, very lined up and vertical and leveled. And on top of that, they're working with large format lenses, which I was used to using. I come from a large format background, so, and then quite frankly, this is the style that I like. It's slower. You're on a tripod. My style of photography was definitely becoming more methodical. I don't go out and make 150 images a day. I go out and I'd be lucky if I came back with 3 from a specific building, sometimes more, sometimes less. But on average, you have to get into buildings, you have to climb buildings and get up in there. So there's a big process, and I scout them out. I might come back the following day. So it's a long process. So I'm in no hurry, and then setting these cameras up is quite easy, but it's very straightforward, leveled, and my vision was going that direction. So, and the print quality from these with the new back was actually better than 4x5 film, in my opinion. It was. And so, and that's why I'm into to architecture. So I started working with this particular camera, which I went through until recently, where I worked with the XT camera, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then I just went up all the Phase One backs. this is the great thing about them. They're all modular, and you take one off and you can upgrade, and they all go onto this with a certain mount for them on the back of the camera. So once you invest into a system, you can just continue to build off of it with the camera, but also the digital backs, and very modular. So here we are. This is where I went up to the next back in line, which is the IQ260, which is a completely new interface of digital backs. And should I go back and show that if everyone is everyone familiar with that?
The first of the IQ series, which is the current series, which had the touch screen and fire. It's the one all the way to the right.
Yeah, the one all the way to the right. The buttons were smaller. The viewing screen was touch screen, larger screen. There was Wi-Fi in it, an ad hoc Wi-Fi that you
1 hour exposure.
1 hour clean exposures. It was amazing. And even though it's a 60 megapixel back as well, my files are just way cleaner and seemingly sharper than the P65 Plus, even though they're same, they were both the 60 megapixel backs.
Having the larger screen on there allowed you to pay more attention and preview the stuff a lot better than the older screens on the 65 Plus. So that probably attributed to that as well.
Way different. Yeah, way different. So this is an image on the tech camera that I used. It's actually a stitched image. For those of you who don't know what a stitched image is, so with the tech camera, you can move the digital back on it. It can, on the back of the camera, it moves, it makes a photograph here, and then you move it over and it makes a photograph here, and they're perfectly in register, and you stitch them together in Photoshop. You process the files and put them together in Photoshop, and they come out, the precision is absolutely perfect on them. And so this happens to be a stitched image. I made this for everyone who wants to know the technical side of things. I had the Schneider 90 millimeter XL lens. It has a huge image circle, super sharp lens. It's Schneider. It's a lot smaller than the Rodenstocks, but that particular lens, I was using all Schneiders at the very beginning. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But this is just a huge building complex. This building went up to 70 stories. It was monumental. And I couldn't even get the width of all of it. There was still another, you see one of these little sections here. There's still another section on either side of this. I mean, it's just this monumental green wall in front of you. They're just huge buildings, huge structures. This is what it looks like when they're just putting it up. This is all bamboo. This is what scaffolding looks like. And again, I was just completely, I was full into this project, but I was really into the process of it and the art form of it. Hong Kong is the last bastion of scaffolders, bamboo scaffolders, and it is an absolute art form. If you look at these closely, there's a complete design in them, and they're made for the environment there in Hong Kong where there's typhoons, the wind is blowing, and as a whole, when it gets up, it's super strong, super strong, but it's flexible and it moves, unlike steel. And it goes up incredibly fast. It's one of the most dense cities on the planet per kilometer. And so they need something. You can't just bring in steel scaffolding around it. The streets are tiny here, and there's no room for all of this. And people are living and working in these things when it's going up. So men climb up. You see them when they're putting the scaffolding up. They're like ants. When you stand back, it looks like ants up there. And all these things are just being built. And this building will go up, be scaffolded in a day and a half, 2 days maybe, up to 40, 50 stories. It's phenomenal. So this is, again, this is a tech camera. I think I shot this actually, this was a Rodenstock. This was a Rodenstock 55, one of the older lenses. on a tech camera. And yeah, and it's one frame, wasn't stitched at all. But again, perspective is what I'm about, and this is the way that my shooting continued, my photography just continued to evolve in this direction. So tech camera just is, again, it's like all the time, that's what I'm on. So eventually we moved to Singapore. I had lived there previously 10 years before. I was there for 2.5 years. And everywhere I go, of course, I want to try to find things to work on where you live. I don't want to be traveling all the time. I'm an independent artist. I'd gotten out of commercial work already for about 4-5 years. And I'd always been an artist doing both of them at the same time. And it just became too much. And this is who I am at heart. This is what I want to do. This is what I always wanted to do when I started photography. I wanted to be an artist, wanted to be represented in galleries. So that's when I made a cut from that, years earlier on this. So we're into Singapore, and when I lived there before, I've just been my travels all around Asia, very much into looking at the philosophy of urban development and urban environments and how people lived. I'm living in cities with millions of people. Saigon had 13 million people at that time when I was living in it. Going into places like Beijing, which was like 25 million people, New Delhi, 28-30 million people. Everywhere, Jakarta, I think it's 18-20 million people there. The way people live and how they form their living environments because of the cultures and how they live together comes out, and it's all different in different countries. And I was really fascinated with that. And so this one, which I'd seen previously, in Singapore, they have these, they call them blocks. They're housing blocks. But this, you would go into a complex and there would be like 8 buildings. They all look like this. They're all painted the same. They look like this. Some are smaller, shorter, but they all have these big numbers on them. And that's way for taxis, when you come into the complex, all these buildings are all over. To find the building that you need to go to, you just look up for like 168A or 162B, and then because your person sitting in the taxi would tell you his address, and this is before GPS and so on. So that's what these numbers are all. So I started making these, and they're all different colors, and these were made in the 60s, late 50s and 60s. So really retro color schemes and really, really odd, funky things that I was just fascinated with them as well. So so I just started photographing them again, and or photographing them as a project. And this is one example. Here's another example here of this building was actually scheduled to come down, but you can see right there, I think there was still about 6 floors below, 6 or 7 floors below, and about 6 floors above, around that, 5, 6 above. And this is number 11, obviously. And these buildings were getting torn down. So I'm standing in the same building, looks exactly the same, except it's across, down below, they have little communal like playgrounds and so on. There's 8 buildings like this. And it was getting ready to be torn down. So in fact, no one is living in any of them. So they were a couple weeks from being destroyed. They were all locked up. And I went in looking at one. I passed it in my car when I was driving all the time. I passed it and decided to stop by, just checking around, going around, see if I could get in. And there was someone else, it wasn't me, someone else had cut a lock on one of the fence doors to allow up the stairwell. So I went and got my my tech camera, and this is on the IQ260 as well. Went up and I made this image, and this building came down the following week. It was gone. So, and this is all over Singapore, on the outsides of Singapore, very local buildings. This is India. This is the spice market in New Delhi, actually in Old Delhi. Old Delhi is the older part of New Delhi. It's in a place called Chandi Chowk Market. It's a huge, huge market. 50, 60 square blocks. It's huge. It's basically a district in town, and it's just the markets. And this is the area of the spice, where the spices are. So you go out and everyone here deals and sells spices. So this was, I made this, I climbed in, went into the center part of this little area here. There was some kind of roof type areas that went up. This is a kind of a square area, and they had built up in the middle. I climbed up onto the top of it. It was made with a Schneider 28XL lens, which was an awesome, super, super sharp lens, which I used often. And that was on the Cambo and the IQ260. And at that time, too, this goes in. These are some other works I did. Are there any questions? Anyone? Lance, has anyone asked for any questions? Or I can. Yeah.
Post them up, and then we'll continue after them.
Yeah.
Where and how did you get the funding for your Vietnam project, or was it self-funded?
Yeah. Okay. I was young. I had moved there out of school. Eventually, there were grants that I got, but again, I live with. I'll make it quick because we have a large family background with Vietnam. My father being there during the war, going back in the late 80s, helping start business with health organizations, and through that, giving donated medical equipment from the U.S. back to Vietnam. They developed a lot of relationships with Vietnamese people, working with them, and we had a Vietnamese girl who came and lived with our family. She's my little Vietnamese sister, and when I went over, I lived with her family. That's how it started. Went in to live with other doctors through this organization who were part of this, and then eventually, started working, selling prints and so on. And then I was actually living there. But at the very beginning, it was saving money, running credit cards up, selling what I could to get whatever, and then going back. And it was very, very inexpensive at the time in the early 90s. I mean, we didn't even have an embassy there. There was we as Americans didn't have an embassy. It was very, very inexpensive. You could live and travel very, very easy. And I think I was 25 when I moved there. So that's how it all started.
Okay, great. Well, next question. Now that you have a digital medium format, how do you feel about shooting film now?
Wow. It was interesting. I was actually, I don't know if I was talking to you about it or if I was talking to Doug maybe. Or maybe Doug questioned me about it at the Cultural Heritage Meetup talk, and I was, talking about this and digital and everything, and I said, I don't miss too much. I mean, I miss the magic of the film. I don't miss carrying an 8x10 around. Quite honestly, I have an 8x10 camera now that is this IQ4-150 that, it's this big, literally this big.
Do you have the X2 with you? Do you have it?
I do.
You want to hold it up?
I mean, this is the size of the camera. So here's the digital back, and this is the IQ4-150, and this is the camera, and the quality out of this. You turn these the back. I don't know if you can see it, but the back will go up and down with these. I don't know which one I'm doing. I think I'm doing slides, but these little levers will make this back go up and down or left and right. So when you're set up, you can organize or level everything, so your perspective is perfect. And this is what I use, and the quality of this is, in my opinion, now actually I compared it to some of my 8x10s that have been drum scanned. This quality is better.
That's great to hear.
Some might debate that, but I don't miss carrying huge cameras around any longer, and the lenses are for large format are huge. So yeah, I miss the magic. It wouldn't be nice. I mean, if someone gave me an 8x10, I'd love to have one and to process some film every once in a while. But printing, no, not in.
Okay. Next question. In staying in the same vein of hardware, I'd like to know your point of view about Rodenstock versus Schneider Blue Ring. Rodenstock, of course, is the more modern optic of these days. You've recently had some experiences using an older Schneider lens with your IQ4-150. You want to share some of that?
Sure. Well, first of all, the XT camera and the XF, completely two different games. I mean, you don't go out and shoot fast moving things, portraits with an XT, with this camera. It's just not the camera to do it. You can do it.
Right.
But so that's the starter. So comparing the lenses, the blue ring lenses, I mean, I know that you can use a blue ring on this. That wasn't, the question was for the XF as well, right? Or was it?
Yeah, just in general, I believe the question was talking, what your feelings are, Rodenstock on the XT versus the XF with the Schneider Blue Ring.
Well, the blue rings on the XF are phenomenal. They're phenomenal. But I wouldn't, if you're going to talk actual tech, yeah, you might get some people who disagree, but I think the tech camera lenses are sharper. They're just, the quality's better. They're way more expensive, and because of the quality and what goes into the lenses themselves. So I guess to answer that question for you, I would decide what you want to shoot. I don't shoot my XF any longer. I mean, I do very occasionally, and I have some blue ring lenses, but I don't use them often because it's not the camera of my choice.
Okay.
But the XF, though, I just actually found that old 28 millimeter Schneider lens, which I tried to, which I loved on the IQ3-100 not for the lenses before that, the IQ260.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite lens of all time. Super small, but when you put it onto this, it just didn't work.
With the modern day sensor.
It didn't work with the modern day sensors, and so Rodenstock is the way to go, and they are phenomenal.
Yeah. One more question, then we'll get back to the presentation. What other software tools do you use for black and white conversions, if any, other than C1 Pro?
None. I'm in Capture One Pro only. I've never used anything else since I went to it in 2007, end of 2007. I do all my work in Capture One Pro, or as much as I can, and it has progressed from the years, over the years. Before I would do what I could in Capture One Pro, and then it would go into Photoshop, and then I would have to work on everything. But color and everything I worked on in Capture One Pro. At that time, very early on, I was, working with saturation. This is before they had the black and white checkpoint in Capture One Pro. So I would desaturate, and then work with contrast and so on, and then export it into Photoshop for TIFFs, and that's how I went. And it was probably 20% Capture One, 30% Capture One, and then the rest in Photoshop, or I don't know, 50-50, something like that. Now it's probably 80% Capture One, and the rest is in Photoshop. I mean, very little in Photoshop these days. I mean, Capture One now, version 20 is, you can just do so much in it. But to get a TIFF, yeah, you have to export it out. So I don't.
Well, great. One last one, and then we're going to continue since this is XT related. What is your favorite lens to shoot with on the XT?
Wow. I love the, I would say probably right now, the 70 is just an amazing lens, super, super sharp. I love the 32. I don't know. It depends. 70 is just really, really, really an awesome lens. I'm really looking forward to the 50 that's coming out.
Yeah.
I think I put my name down for it, but I don't know. I'm looking for that one.
Yeah, the 50 will be nice. It's starting to ship this week or so. We'll round out the lens offerings for the XT. The 23, 32, 50, 70, and then we're going to have the 90 coming out in the fall, and then something longer. But the beauty of the XT is you're able to use your Cambo mounted lenses in the manual mode on the XT.
I mean, that's right. That's part of the system. That's just amazing.
Yeah. Cool. Do you want to continue on with the presentation?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we next went in. This is something that I started, which is interesting during today's time in life for all of us. This is a project called Asian Markets. So all over Asia and markets, and they have everything inside: meat, vegetables, clothes, whatever. And there are these giant places that are, and particularly not in so much modern towns. They still have them, but they're not in the centers of huge cities like, Hong Kong has, I think, only one left. Modernized cities don't have these. They're generally outside. Not necessarily all of them, but it's the trend because of supermarkets. Central markets are going out, so they are a place of where communities come together. They meet there. There's restaurants inside, market food and kind of street food is another word really for it. You go inside and people meet there. They do their shopping there. They gather there. They talk. So it's just a whole communal gathering point, and they're very, very important for communities. And so I went around to all of them and to markets all over Asia and different parts. This one happens to be in the island of Java in Indonesia. It's the biggest island in Indonesia. It's in a town called Semarang. It's kind of in the middle of the island on the north coast. And huge market. I'd seen this, I'd researched it, and it was actually an old mosque from 150 years ago. And being an architectural photographer, when I first saw this thing, I'd never seen anything like this anywhere else in Asia. And I was living in Singapore at the time. It's like an hour and a half flight to get there. And so I'm like, I'm going to this place for sure as a market. Went in, I would go around, get different images to photograph, but at the same time, this project, if you've been into markets, the sounds and the smells are completely overwhelming. So what I ended up doing with this as well is with a Zoom H4n recorder, if you know what those are, very high definition audio recorders. I would make this particular image, and then I would go down and I would record the sound of everything in this particular image. And you hear people at the bottom, they're chopping chickens. There's people talking. There's people bargaining for food. It's just a barrage of noise. And so I ended up creating an app, putting these together. And then, I had an exhibition printed out, an 80-inch print. Everyone would come download the app, put on headphones. So inside of a gallery, there would be, a market from Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, India. And then you could go in and with your headphones, find the image on the app and stand in front of an 80-inch print and play the high def sound of what this market sounds like. And then go to the next one and play in Japan somewhere and vice versa. And so this is a project that I'm still working on. and it'll continue to go whenever, well, hopefully markets will be safe to go back into one day. But I made this anyway with, again, tech camera. This is the IQ260, and it's this was the 28 millimeter Schneider lens that I had before, the 28 XL. Here's another one. Oh, cool. So here we go. This starts the IQ3, the 100 megapixel back. No one ever knew, no one ever thought. There was all these debates, as everyone heard, is this back going to ever come out? Are they going to make a 100 megapixel back? And it came out, and I immediately, I think the first day, you know, that's when I met Lance. I was just really interested and wanted to get this. And so I ended up getting it, upgrading to it. And here I am on the left-hand side. This is in Laos, in the capital city of Vientiane. And I'm in this market. I had to, so there's a few things on here. It's 100 megapixels. The sensor,
It's a Sony
modern sensor.
full frame.
Yeah.
The really thing that was the game changer with going to CMOS, it was Phase's first foray, our second foray into CMOS, but full frame, is it gave, you know, full frame capability, higher ISO performance than CCD, and also the live view wasn't in real time. So using the tech camera.
So with the tech camera, that's what you have to use on live view. There's no viewfinder to look through. For all of those who don't know about it, you have to look at the live view on it. And this one came out real time. So you move the camera, the view just moves just like it does, you know, like you're looking outside. So huge game changer. 100 megapixels. Felt like I was shooting 8x10. The quality of the images when it came out, I'm making huge prints with these, and which I was making off the 260 as well, but these were just a completely different level. One thing you had to do is I had to change all of my Schneider lenses, and went up to Rodenstock lenses for these because it was the modern sensor, and the Schneiders didn't work with them any longer. The wide lenses.
Yeah. I
still do have a Schneider 90 millimeter lens, which does work, but yeah, the Rodenstocks were all optimized specifically for this back with Phase One. So this is went back. I've been working in Vietnam now for 27 years. I have a multitude of projects that I just continue to go on, and this is one. This is these are. In Vietnamese, it's called Nha Hanoi. Nha means house. And so Hanoi was my home for 4.5 years. I love it. I considered it my home all the time. I've wanted to live there. So, you know, after that, I love going there. It has a huge meaning for me. It's where I started my career. It's really a part of who I am. And these are certain areas in Hanoi. These are older apartments, but they build out on them against, you can see coding, building codes aren't strictly enforced like they are here in the US, which makes it great for us, for photographers, to be able to work on this. So this is a particular image. This was, I shot this, I believe with the 32, and then I, as you can see me here on the left, holding the camera right there, 32 Rodenstock, 100 megapixel back on the Cambo WRS 5000 tech camera. And then I ended up putting a different lens on, and I stitched this, making it wider. I wanted the width of these. These are called cages. In Vietnamese, they call them the cages. And so these are actual cages that, you know, boarding up there, happens to be theft. People have their spaces, and so when you build out like this, there's caging that goes around. So Vietnamese call these cage houses. So I've done a huge project. It's on my website. I think there's there's 20 images, 15, 20 images of this particular project of older buildings in Hanoi that hopefully, I think they're going to be coming down one day. Hope not, but they are the essence of some of the older architecture French, Vietnamese, and a little bit of mix of Russian when the Russians came in after the US left. And another project here was, this is when I moved, or when I started, we moved back to the US in January of 2014 after I've been there 20 years in Asia, essentially 20 years, except for 1 year, a little over a year coming back here to the US. And I actually came here to DC where I met my wife in 2002. And we had lived over by the U Street station. If anyone knows DC, I lived on S Street right off of 14th, and this was the closest metro. And I walked into it one day after being felt completely, my wife used to call me a tourist because I had come back in the US and I'd been in Asia for so long that I just didn't, I was always like, wow, what is this? And, she would look at me like, what are you talking about? This is normal. I hadn't seen anything like this before. And I walked into this station and it just blew me away. Being an architectural photographer or into structure, I was into structure. I wasn't photographing it a lot at that time, but I had an interest in it. So when we moved here back to the US in 2014, I didn't know what to work on. We're living in San Francisco, and I just came up with this idea. We would come back here to visit family and cousins and everything with our kids. I went into the metro one day and it just clicked. I was like, this is what I'm going to go back to. So started working on this. I contacted WMATA, which is the WMATA. This is the Metro Transit Authority here in DC. I made some images, proposed them to them. Very strict on, wisely, very strict on security. So I had to propose a lot of work, what I was going to be doing, let them know about my background, my books, my career, and I got permits from them and walked around with them with this wonderful woman here, Cynthia, who's standing with me and who handles all permits, and we worked together on this, going through these, and so this has been my project on and off for the last few years. And the whole thing's done with the IQ4-150, except for now I've continued on with the 4-150 on it. But it's all about the architecture and the trains, which are blurring through here. These are the exposures of them going through. And this is two exposures. So one, the trains aren't always going through like this, but I wanted the trains secondary. People are blurred through it. They're long exposures, anywhere from 7 to 10, 15 seconds. And I wanted to focus mainly on the architecture. So that's, that's what this whole project is about. Going back again, back and forth, I still travel back to Asia a lot. And after my cocoons work that you had seen, the color work earlier, which my book came out, when was it, a year and a half ago, December of 2018 or January 2019, that cocoons book was released. I went back to my roots, which is photographing cocoons, but in black and white. And I had said this earlier, I had originally started this project in black and white on the P45 Plus back. But they weren't holding to me. They just weren't, because they're so colorful, all these different color materials. So I went back, and I have a tremendous amount of them in black and white. And so I went back, now that I've photographed it in color for so long, I'm actually going back, and it's Cocoons 2, but they're all in black and white, back to the original. So this started it off with the IQ4-150. This is right after the huge hurricane, or typhoon that went through Hong Kong last year or 2 years ago. It just decimated everything. And this is what it looks like. This is how strong bamboo scaffolding is. They take a direct hit from a Category 5 typhoon, and they still hold up. Some came down, but I have a lot of photographs where they're just like this. They're mangled in here like this. So this was part of this particular project. And so that was all with the IQ3. And then here we start, which I upgraded with the new back, which has really changed so many things for me in my career, the way I shoot. I would say it's almost the perfect digital back. I absolutely love this back, and mixed in use with the Phase One XT, it's just a perfect combination. 150 megapixels. So when everyone thought that 100 was going to be tops, all of a sudden Phase One comes out with 150 megapixels.
Megapixels. It's the platform that they came out with for the IQ4, with the features, which I'm sure you'll touch upon, that continue to be released as firmware updates.
Yes, so much more to the back, than just the megapixels. I mean, that's a huge thing for printing for me. As you can see behind me, I have an 80-inch print on my viewing wall from the 100. But for me, I print large. The galleries that represent me, clients. I constantly sell large prints. So all of a sudden, I'm printing now quality that is. It looks like it's like from an 11 by 14 negative, from film camera, like just a huge negative. The resolution is phenomenal. But more than that is, now there's frame averaging inside, which is a firmware function of the camera, which takes. Actually, Lance, you want to mention about exactly what that does, and I can tell you how I use it.
How you applied it. Yeah, well, frame averaging is a feature that Phase One came out with for the IQ4-150 shortly after its release as an upgrade, which allows you to simulate the use of ND filters. So instead of putting a piece of glass, 2-stop, 4-stop, 8-stop, whatever, filter in front of your lens, we actually take multiple exposures to build up an exposure. So for example, let's say you're exposed at 100th of a second or 60th of a second, but you wanted to simulate a 1-minute shot. So instead of figuring out, counting with your fingers, how many neutral density filters do I need, or this or that, you could just go to the menu for frame averaging and say, I want to simulate or emulate a 1-minute shot. And let's say we were at a 60th of a second before, it'll actually do 100 shots to equal the 1 minute, all in sequence. And when it's finished doing the 100 shot or whatever it is in the division of it, it'll create one file that simulates the use of the ND filter.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Lance, for that. That's
like in this shot, really with your older systems, you'd be fumbling with glass on the front of the camera and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm standing here. This is something I commonly do. I've done this a lot. You'll see some images in my first books, in the Mekong or in canals. I had fishing waders, and I go in, I set the camera on. Other ones, I was trying to find images for this presentation, where I could show where I had a 4x5 camera just this far over the water. I'm standing in a canal in the Mekong Delta, photographing these mangroves or nipa palms going down. And so there's something I do often. This particular day, but it's hard, big camera. I usually had people right next to me. They had, if you remember film, I'd have to put a neutral density filter over the lenses. You're dealing with cameras this big. I had a small dark cloth over my head to look through the viewing. The bellows are going out. You got cable releases, cables. So even on the previous version of a tech cam and the retro lenses, the Schneiders and so on, you still had cable releases, and you have a cable that goes from the lens into the digital back for tech cameras today. And then you have to put neutral density filters. So if I want to, which I commonly do from the very beginning of my career, I do long exposures. It's a huge part of my work from when I started in photography school. I love the look of blurred things. I didn't know how it was accomplished, and I've eventually emulated that and implemented it into my workflow and my work throughout, and my vision throughout. And that's my philosophy. I mean, life moves, so I like to show movement in my work. But here, I mean, the wind was actually blowing like 20 miles an hour. There were like 20, 30 mile an hour gusts this day. You can see the water is moving around on this. And had I had gone out there, I'm actually, I'm moving. If I had to put on, glass in front, I had cables. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. Right. And so on the new back, everything is digital. Everything reads. The digital back reads the XT camera body, which reads the lens. And all I'm doing is touch screening my exposure. So I wanted a 2-minute, 3-minute exposure on this, and I just dialed it in, which took a succession of like, again, it was like, I think it was a 60th of a second or a 15th of a second during this day to a proper exposure. And it took something, like 300 images and put them on, blended them all together in the camera software, and then spits out one file.
And give you the preview right then and there. So you see if you've gotten it or not.
And you see it right on, it blends it together. It takes about 5 seconds and it blends them together. And this is what I got. And this is exactly what I was looking for. Not so interested about the water. Secondary, I like movement, but I'm looking at the focus and the functionality and the structure of this particular project, which is my current project, which I've actually been photographing for a while now, but as a full project now, it's on dams. And so this was just it's 3 weeks ago, a month ago, something like that. And so here's what you got. I mean, look at the water, looks like ice. You're moving down, and you really see the form and the structure of this dam. And that has been a huge. That's one of the biggest things, frame averaging. I think it's one of the most impactful things in photography in the last decade or the last decade and a half, for sure, in photography. And that's why there's also dual expose, where the getting the highlights and being able to work, it's taking 2 exposures and blending those together, one for your highlights, one for your shadows, and it comes out so you have the dynamic range rather than, I believe it's 15
stops out of camera. This goes beyond it.
And this is, I think, it's putting it up to around 18, 19 stops of
dynamic range.
Dynamic range. So when you go back into Capture One, now you're able to adjust the highlights, the mid-tone highlights, just absolutely perfectly, and it happens instantaneously with 2 exposures.
Yeah.
So these are 2 things that are already built in. They're usable. They're inside this back already, but there's a lot of other firmware that is inside, built in already, that I know Phase One hasn't released yet. Yeah. If anyone was listening to Lau on his talk with Phase One 2 weeks ago, he was talking about that there's a lot in there and I'm really excited about what's built into that body already.
It's built for the future. And, I can't tell you how great it is. Like, after Peter comes back from a shoot like this and he calls me and he's like, Lance, that feature works. I can't believe it. I can't believe how I lived before having it. So it's great that these tools are there and they're actually being used.
Yeah. So this is just another example. This is my current work. These are over the last few months. Different dam images around in the area. This is like actually right when lockdown happened. This one I actually got kicked out the parking lot of this dam. This one in particular is like up in northern Maryland towards Pennsylvania. I'd researched it. And the parking lot is actually on state property. So when the lockdown happened in Maryland, I parked there and I actually and this was when it was like I was the last person on earth. This is the very first thing that happened. I didn't see anyone all day driving. It was weird. I didn't see any people walking anywhere, but my job, I actually, by law, photographers were able to go out. They qualify, in Maryland anyway, qualify under a broadcasting type or journalistic job. So we were able to go out, but I mean, this dam is in the middle of nowhere. It's like out in the forest. And so I wasn't around people anyway, but yeah, police came by, kicked me off. But he said, going over the top of it, he allowed me to make a photograph off the top because it's an easement and they can't shut down an easement. So you can walk across the dam and he couldn't stop me. So we had a good conversation from 10 feet away. And he looked up on his computer. I told him who I was and what I did. He looked at my website and he was like, okay, go over there, make an image. And he gave me his address. He wants me to send him a print. So I've sent him a print from this. He let me hang out over there. So this is one I've gone back to this dam a couple of times. This was not long ago. Still, dam was locked off. I had to walk in, hike in downstream like 2 miles to get to it. This is another frame imaging image. And just again, like when you blow this up really large, I mean, the detail of the water, I don't have a slide of that, but the detail off the water just dripping off these little stupas here it's like you can see water drops just crystal clear. It's another huge dam. This is in North Carolina. And so, yeah, that's really on my personal work, what I do all the time, what I'm constantly working on. Another thing that we've spoken about is, so again, from my film background, I have a huge archive of film, and I've always needed, because I have galleries that represent me. I still sell that work. I've had a need to digitize the archive, of my film, and I've tried all sorts of, Imicon scanners. I've tried drum scanners to get decent scans of these digitally to where I can go in and print. I do all my own printing, always have, and so. To make a large print, I've had to, pass my sheet film over to people, 4x5 large format film. I've done it on Imicon scanners. The quality is just not there. It's time consuming. A few times my film has come back scratched. If you know about drum scanners and the process, a lot of people, there are times where they put oil onto the underside of the film to put it onto a plexiglass cylinder, and so there won't be any anti-Newton rings, and then they put acetate over the top of it, and it's this spinning, and the scanner goes through the center of the film, scanning it through this plexiglass cylinder. My film has come back scratched with oil still on it, and I've just been very frustrated. So I almost bought my own drum scanner years ago. Thank goodness I didn't. They run on old Macintosh computers too. This technology is really old. So this is when I ran into Lance again talking about this, which is the DT Atom and the RCam, which is one of their film digitizing systems. And he talked to me about it, and these are my my needs that need to go through, and I've been looking at this for quite a long time, and I've invested into the system, and originally to work on my own film, and then but I've always been into this too, and so recently I've opened up a company that does this for high-end artists such as me, who have film archives that need to be scanned, and so hopefully and that's what I work on. So anyway, so I've opened that up, and so I'm seeing, you know, there's detail scanning in these that aren't available, like in the best scanners, which were
Yeah,
Tango drum scanners.
since we're using the Phase One IQ4 in this situation, digital back, you know, we have that 15 to 18 stops of dynamic range. And some of the comments that I get after we do sample scans for clients is, wow, I can't believe there was detail in those shadows or this dense negative. And Peter has some examples that he can talk about.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the quality of this. So one thing that I've needed, and I'm going to go back to this, right? Or actually, this is actually a glass, an 8x10 glass negative carrier. So, which on this particular image, there's a glass negative. But I have filmed this particular project. This was back in Vietnam. This was shooting 4x5 and large format and 8x10 film. Again, my influences are 19th century photographers. And so I always liked how they shot glass plate negatives, and you could always see the edges were tape, you know, where they would tape the glass plate into the camera, and they had these edges on them. And I always liked that. I wasn't going to go learn to shoot glass plates at all. So I ended up taking my sheet film, and believe it or not, I bought a film chopper, one of those old, put paper in and you chop paper. And I chopped my film, the rebate edges off the film. And so you can see these corners like this up in here. But once you do that, you can't scan them in a 4x5 film holder because they're smaller than 4x5 film. So nothing, you have to have them in glass carriers. And so printing in the darkroom was fine, but I was only you're getting that. And so I need these larger. So drum scanners weren't allowing me to do it well. Again, all the oil and scratches that would happen, but also the acetates. I don't know if you can see it well, but there's haloing on this, the image on the right. There's halos just on the side where the acetate, the light and the acetate would reflect onto the film. So you get these little weird halos or shadow areas on the film. And so it wasn't until the DT system here where I could put these on the glass carriers like this and digitize them and digitize it with such detail that I hadn't seen my film actually ever look like this before. I was pulling out detail that I had never seen before. This is an example of my one particular negative of mine on the system lens above. This is an image from Angkor Wat in Cambodia. This is a great example. You can see down below where off to the left-hand side is the IQ4-150 back on top of the RCam, which is right behind me here, this system right here. And it has the Schneider 120 aspheric lens on it. And then on the right-hand side, this was the best scanner, considered the best drum scanner around it, Heidelberg Tango drum scanner. There was a highlight, if you can see on the left side above, on the left side of the temple, that I could never get out. And the drum scanner couldn't get out. Of course, I could never print it out. And this was just 2 months ago. I pulled this negative out again. And there's actually, when you put a loop over the negative, there's actually detail on the negative. It just would not come out. And here it is. This is a straight scan off the IQ4-150. And that is complete detail in the negative. And so I haven't never printed this, and I made this in 1999. I've never printed this piece of film, and I've always wanted to. So I'm able to now. This is another one. This is from my series on structure in Bagan in Myanmar or Burma. There's an area of like 2,000 temples. It was built at the same time as Angkor Wat. But up on the right-hand side where there's a highlight in between the cloud, the same exact thing. There was a bright ray of light coming through there. I could, of course, never print it in the darkroom or burn it in. It would just look burned in, and a drum scanner could never get that in. It could never get the detail in on that. And I've been able to. I've never printed this negative, and out of all the entire project of this from I think 1999 or 2000, this was my favorite negative, and of course it didn't work. So this is my studio that I'm in right now, and this is the company that I've opened, Aperture Archival, and we, as I said, it's a boutique company and focus on film archives of working needs of artists and who have the same needs of mine, and we scan for archive and digitize and preserve for people who need the highest quality scans possible, and that can be achieved 35 millimeter 120 millimeter film, 4x5, 8x10, and in some special cases we can work on things up to 14x20 sheet film. And we also digitize flat art, sheet music, and objects as well.
And your FADGI 4-star compliant. Your FADGI 4-star compliant.
FADGI 4. Yes. So meeting all the cultural heritage guidelines for institutions, government institutions, that meet up with all the guidelines that meet all of that, which is actually hard to do with a lot of legacy scanners and other scanners with lenses and so on. It's a combination of everything. So that really kind of ends it. I'm just going through some other images here these are some more of, you guys can start shooting questions in. Sure. I'm going to just pop through some of these because I know it's about time to go. This is part of, again, more of my Metro work. Different images that have gone in through Metro and over the last 3 years working on this, which is being designed actually right now. It is actually designed. COVID kind of put the book project on a little bit of a halt. Hopefully that'll pick up again at some point. These are just different images.
We have a few questions here.
Project.
That'll pop up here.
Yeah.
In your back to your Java photo, Ivan asked, he says his eyes were going to the ceiling and the architecture first. Was it the intent?
Absolutely. That was the intent.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. Those columns going down, it was very, centered. Lines are converging down at the end. It's bringing you back into the back of the market, but definitely that was the full intent.
What issues? This is from Kevin. What issues do you have with the e-shutter, and how do you overcome them? I guess what he's trying to ask is the electronic shutter built into the IQ4 that was introduced in the IQ3, which has been optimized in the IQ4.
Oh, okay, the e-shutter.
E-shutter.
Oh, okay. Well, as Lance knows, we've had many conversations about this. I didn't like the e-shutter before because, again, when I used movement on the IQ3, it was different technology, was slower rolling, and you would get some streaks. Cars would be kind of oblonged, on the subject matter that I work with. So it wasn't working with people or cars. And in the environments that I was working on in clouds and so on, it wouldn't make a difference. This e-shutter on this it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it's faster. It's better performing than on the IQ3.
Yeah, no problem. I would actually say no problems at all. I've never seen any artifacts missing, nothing. I've never seen anything stretched. I'd have to categorize that answer as it's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, that's great. From Ivan again. The image where you were wading in water, were you concerned about the camera falling due to the water current? If so, how did you ensure the camera would be safe? Makes me nervous to see that camera in the water.
Yeah, that's what photo insurance is about. Of course, it's when you're going in, that current was actually a little bit strong where I was, but not really going down the river too strong, but it's just that mass body of water, and there were waves going, so it's actually, it's pushing you. But I've done it a lot. I have great fishing waders with great work, and the tripod's down there, so their legs are out. So you're using that. Knock on wood, right there. I hope I will never fall, but should I do that, I have very good insurance backing me up on that.
And
they know that.
And with Phase One included in the 5-year warranty is a free loaner for him to use while his camera's being repaired. Of course, I'll have to pay for the repair, but that's what the insurance is. But you'll be shooting up and shooting in no time.
Great point. I didn't even know about that.
Oh, okay. Forgot to tell you. Susan asks, did you deliberately choose an overcast day for the dam photograph?
Yeah, all of my work, I like working. I rarely ever work in, I can almost say never work in hard sunlight, never. Or even, at the end of the day with stuff going, not in my personal work. I like very soft, very flat light. I can work with the files better. It's the mood. I think if you go back, if anyone goes through my website and go through my books, you can see the tone and the mood and the, the style that I work in. And it is, it's overcast, muted, soft tones and low contrast. That way I can push my files. I can put as much contrast into them as I want. I can work with them longer rather than if it's too contrasty, then you're only limited.
Okay.
To work in.
Paul is asking, do you use a RIP for printing?
I do. Yes.
Which one?
The RIP I use is Colorgate.
Mm-hmm.
German. I've been using them for 12 years or more now. Colorgate out of Germany. Okay. Awesome software.
Great. And I think that takes care of it all for today,
Yeah. This is, I guess, quickly, this is an image I just made not long ago that Lance knows. I sent him a selfie of me right here doing this. This is the IQ4 and the XT. I just want to show you the detail of this. This is with the 70mm lens. And I go back into the far back, right in the center, and I've done 100% expansion, and this is the detail in the back with the 70mm lens. And when you see it on a 30-inch screen, I mean, you can see in the very far back, you can see dirt and little tiny bits of cracked concrete back here, like you're standing right in front of them.
You get that over to the engineers for bridge inspections.
Yeah. I mean, here's another example of just some Hong Kong work, the Black and White Cocoons project, bamboo. This is a 65-story building of bamboo. When you see it with these backs again, the detail is incredible. And then last slide here is, these are 3 of the books that I've published. The gray one, Vietnam Ports and Landscapes, that came out in 2001. The next one, Enduring Spirit of Vietnam, that came out in 2007. One, I think PDN's Best Book of the Year. Michael Kenna, my good friend, he wrote the foreword. Cocoons, this just came out, a little over a year ago. Powerhouse Publishing out of New York. And this is one of the covers for Metro. That is, the book is designed, it's ready to go. I'm still working on it, but this will be in the future. So these are upcoming. You can see all this work on my website. And
great. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to thank you, Peter, for your presentation today and sharing your work with everyone. I want to thank everyone who was on the webinar for attending, and hopefully you'll take a look at some of our older archives of Project Lemonade, which is located on our website. Plus we have some exciting other webinars coming up in the near future and into the far future as well. So your feedback's very important to us. You'll be receiving an email following up this webinar that's going to have a survey, a little survey on there. So your feedback's very important, and also a link to a replay of this presentation. And we had also made this presentation available as a download here, and we'll put a link up in the archives so you can download it to really look at some of these images a little closer than via the video screen resolution. And then here's Peter's contact information. And, you know, I wish him the best of luck with Aperture Archival. I think it's a great idea, you know, a service bureau that's run by an artist, you know. So best of luck with that. And again, thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Lance. Thanks, everyone else. Thanks for everyone for joining. Didn't get to see you here, but thanks for tuning in, and appreciate it. And yeah, feel free if anyone needs any inquiries or questions, just shoot something to one of these emails and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can.
Great. Well, thank you.
Great.
And everyone, have
Thanks.
a good day.
You too. Thanks.